Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're stepping into a world that seems like it's just pixels and screens, right? But we're going way beyond that. We're going to explore the sort of hidden landscape of video games, and not just, the tech side or the social stuff. We're using a really unique perspective here. Our mission today is to unpack the surprising origins and the really deep, sometimes subtle influences of gaming. We're drawing from some, let's say, unconventional source material. Yeah, this material gives us fascinating, energetic, almost esoteric view on video games, right from their very first spark all the way to how they might impact our minds, bodies, even our collective energy. And just to be clear, we're here to report impartially on the ideas in these texts, exploring what they claim, but we're not endorsing any specific viewpoint ourselves. So yeah, let's dive in. Let's start right at the beginning. That first glimmer, what would eventually become video games. Our source material, it says something pretty surprising right off the bat. Video games weren't some, grand plan, you know? No designer sketching out fantasy worlds initially. So how does it describe how they actually started?
Right. It's fascinating because, according to these texts, the initial vision was, well, purely technical. Think cables, digital files, motherboards, basically this huge interconnected network. The idea, as the source puts it, sort of emerged almost by chance. You had scientists, mathematicians just exploring what these early computers could even do. They were finding these mobile actions, programs that could make things move on screen, and these movements just, well, they became games. It wasn't really intended as entertainment, more like an accidental discovery of interaction.
Wow, accidental. Okay. And the immediate impact of this accidental birth, that's where the source gets really thought-provoking. What does it claim happens to a person's energy field, say, after just an hour of gaming?
Okay, so the observation, as is detailed in our source, is pretty specific. It talks about a green screen or maybe a pixelated double appearing right beside the player. This suggests, according to the source anyway, that the player gets kind of contained and formatted by the game system itself. And this apparently creates a dissociation, meaning the player isn't really centered, not quite in their own shoes, if that makes sense. They're sort of displaced.
A pixelated double. That's a striking image. And this displacement, the source suggests, it feeds right into the player's focus.
Exactly. It suggests players become totally absorbed, almost hypnotized through their eyes, their hands. Their whole being is just pointed at the game's goal. Right.
And meanwhile, their physical body, its basic needs, they just seem completely abandoned, left behind.
Okay, so if that's the immediate thing, what happens when this becomes like a regular pattern? How does regular gaming from this energetic view affect our subconscious?
Our consciousness.
Well, the source describes it as creating these programs. They seem to mark what it calls interstices in the brain. Think of them like energetic imprints or pathways. And these programs, it claims, they trigger really powerful reward systems. You get these massive hormonal discharges, which in turn creates this intense sensation of lack, like a strong craving, an emptiness that only feels like it can be filled by going back to the game for more of that immediate hit, that pleasure, and cognitively. The source suggests the game just takes up a huge amount of mental space. It sort of encroaches on free will, leaves very little room for just reflective thought. It's like the mind gets really noisy,
That's a big claim about mental space and free will. So for someone who plays a lot, it sounds like the source is saying the real world starts to feel less intense, less powerful than the game, always pulling them back.
Yeah, that seems to be the idea presented.
So what does the source material say happens to the subliminal part of a really dedicated hardcore player?
The description here is, well, it's pretty disturbing imagery. It's like falling into a bottomless well, disconnecting from yourself, from basic needs. It calls it a vertiginous fall into a form of nothingness. The comparison used is like an astronaut just lost in vast space. No sound, no direction, no connection to self or anything bigger, just lost. And the critical detail here, according to the source, is this luminous cord. It supposedly ties them directly to the game, making the game their only structure, their only real goal. It becomes their main reference point for existence.
Wow, that luminous cord idea is really vivid as the source presents it. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the physiological side. Addiction, energy depletion. What does the source say happens inside the player's body?
All right, so as we touched on, the source suggests these immediate dopamine rushes create a really strong addictive pull. They're so powerful, it claims, they lead to intense neuronal circuit activation, but also significant nervous system fatigue, just wearing the system out. And this exhaustion, this physiological drain, causes players to neglect vital needs, forgetting to eat, drink, use the restroom. the basics. So they often end up relying on quick fixes like sugar and caffeine, just for that quick energy boost, which isn't sustainable, obviously. It neglects their long-term health. And this disconnect from the source's perspective, it's a profound dissociation. Players project themselves into these powerful, often superhuman avatars, completely forgetting their own physical bodies, their own fundamental needs.
And beyond the body, what about the mind? What does the source reveal about, say, mental programming elements or archetypal symbols within games?
Well, according to the source, there's a strong theme of overpowerment. The desire to be this super powerful warrior or a superhero. This, it suggests, taps into really basic human urges. Survival, strength, maybe escape through violence, often reducing human experience down to these brutal primary impulses. And symbols. The source claims graphics often embed esoteric elements, things like pentacles, circles, numbers, elemental symbols, air, fire, water. You might see ancient symbols on stones, maybe in settings that look like temples. And there's this recurring archetype, killing the Grand Master, who's always shown as some hideous, diabolical figure in the game's story.
Interesting. Okay, let's narrow the focus even more. Combat games, shooting games specifically. Does the source claim they have unique consequences physiologically or psychologically?
Yes, it does. These types of games, the source details, trigger intense adrenaline, huge hormonal discharges. This creates nervous system irritation. And the source suggests this can lead to things like anxiety, insomnia, even what it describes as electric discharges in the body. Palpitations too, maybe even spasmophilia. It also claims it impacts the digestive system, overall organ health, mainly because, again, basic self-care just gets ignored when you're that intensely focused on the game.
And this is where the source presents something particularly unsettling. How does it claim this deep immersion can affect dreams, even mental health?
Yeah, this is a significant claim in the source. Game patterns, it says, can actually enter dreams. They create what it calls a reassuring but tendentious comfort zone. Tendentious meaning like biased, right? The dreams reinforce the player's fantasies about appearance, about power, like being that powerful avatar, having the body or the hair they wish they had. This increased dissociation, the source claims, can lead players to sort of tip over. They might start to believe the avatar's illusion more than reality. And makes a very strong claim here that in extreme cases, this can cause individuals to border on schizophrenia. Now, we really need to stress here, serious mental health conditions like schizophrenia are complex. They absolutely require professional medical diagnosis and treatment. This claim is presented as part of the unique perspective of our source material, okay? It's not presented as a medical fact.
Right, that's a crucial clarification. A very profound and cautionary claim from the source. Okay, what about the cutting edge? VR headsets, designed for even deeper immersion. What does the source say about their impact?
Their impact, as the source describes it, is profound. It claims they literally touch the precious pineal gland. They intensely superimpose virtual reality onto physical reality. This apparently greatly increases the dissociation. And for people who might already be psychologically fragile, the source asserts it can bring schizophrenia really close quickly. The sensations, it claims, are extremely amplified, and people often report feeling this coldness, or what it calls emprise, like a sense of being gripped or taken over. Because of all this, the source describes VR as potentially dangerous, something to be approached with extreme caution.
That definitely gives us a lot to think about regarding the individual. Okay, let's zoom out now. The bigger picture. This huge interconnected world of online gaming. Does the source suggest there's more going on than just the tech networks? Like an unseen force?
Yes, it does, actually. Well, we talked about the technical network earlier. The source describes a kind of parallel energetic counterpart, one that's darker, more organized, and even manipulative. The sheer interconnectedness of all these online games, it claims, actively modifies the player's energetic condition. And it introduces this concept of an egregore, which is like a collective thought form or a kind of group entity created by shared thoughts and emotions. So the idea is you have all these players all playing at the same time, generating really strong emotions, like frustration, rage, triumph. And all that emotion feeds this collective emotional egregore, which then influences what the source calls subtler planes of existence. And this, the source claims, makes large-scale manipulation much easier. It's like it's training humans in a way to be manipulated, to forget their own free will.
Wow. Okay, so if this egregore exists and gets fed like that, who or what does the source suggest actually benefits from this manipulation? Who profits?
The beneficiaries. Well, the source describes them as dark beings of power. Some are supposedly luminous, others venal, corruptible. They're depicted as being connected to strong human emotions, particularly anger. And the descriptions sometimes resemble what might be termed demons or reptilian beings in this specific framework.
Okay. Pulling back again for that global view, what percentage of people worldwide does the source claim are currently under the influence of video games?
The number it gives is pretty striking, 30% currently. 30%. And the trend, it claims, is definitely upward. It was apparently significantly less just 10 years ago, and maybe only around 7 to 9% about 20 years ago. Plus, the fact that online communities are active 24/7 ensures this influence is constantly being fed, day and night. This egregore, the source calls it auto-elementation, self-feeding. It becomes like a second home for players, a fire that fuels itself.
And what about the players themselves? What are the core emotional characteristics, according to the source, of the people who tend to get drawn into this?
The main emotions identified by the source are things like rage, anger, and this intense feeling of power. But these, it suggests, often mask a big fear underneath, and a deep sense of devaluation, like not feeling good enough. So gaming, in this context, offers easy pleasure. It acts almost like an anesthetic, right? Against feeling bad, against pain, even hunger and thirst. It lets players dive deep into what the source calls a 10 times better alternate life. And that creates this really deep fascination.
It certainly sounds like an incredibly complex landscape, as described by the source, but are all games the same? Does it make distinctions? What about something like Tetris or maybe strategy games? They feel very different from combat simulators.
That's a really important point. And no, the source does clarify they're not all the same. Games like Tetris or strategy games, it explains, they activate different parts of the brain. They constructively reinforce things like logic, math skills, spatial visualization, which can be beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Now, it says they can still cause some hypnotic absorption, maybe minor dissociation. But the player tends to stay much more connected to their physical sensations, their emotions. Why? Because there's no avatar identification. You're not projecting yourself into another character. And that seems to lessen that specific kind of energetic impact the source focuses on.
That makes sense, yeah. Following the logic presented. So what about casual players then? People who maybe play just an hour a day, for fun, for recreation.
Right. For occasional recreational play, the source suggests the dissociation is much milder. It's more manageable, especially, it says, for a balanced psyche. While a part of the player does still sort of enter the pixels, enter the game system, the reintegration back into themselves happens more easily, gradually, maybe within 30 minutes to an hour after stopping. It's not instant, but they do come back more fully to the center compared to the hardcore scenario.
Okay, so there's definitely a spectrum of impact described here, depending on the game, the intensity. Awareness seems critical, doesn't it? We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. Really examine the claims from this unique source material, from the accidental birth of games, just pure tech exploration, all the way to these profound energetic and psychological impacts and these hidden collective systems they supposedly interact with. It's been quite an illuminating journey into this unseen side of gaming.
Absolutely. And it's vital to remember the counter message from the source, too. It really emphasizes there is no reason to dread life. Life is always worth living. It's about enjoying material existence, right? Every sensation, every connection, every sharing. There's always a good reason, it says, to love life and to love yourself. The key point being, don't hide in games to the point where it becomes an addiction that cuts you off from that.
Yeah. And the source finishes with this really compelling observation about how this kind of awareness spreads. It describes people literally putting down controllers, looking out windows like they're waking from a dream, and it talks about these little blue lights, people just fully embracing life again, sharing their joy, creating this beautiful, fresh, luminous wave. Which really brings up an important question for you listening right now. How might becoming more aware of these subtle energies and effects of our digital world, as presented in this source, how might that change the way you engage with technology? How might it change how you experience your own reality? What parts of your real life could you maybe embrace with, renewed joy, more presence, something to reflect on perhaps? And maybe, like those little blue lights, share the beauty of living fully,